My character chart series is both a blessing and kind of a curse. It gives me a chance to analyze motives, character dialogue, choices, ideals, beliefs, arcs. And you guys really seem to love them, and I do too. I love analyzing the little tidbits of information we get on characters. However, the problem is that for a character to be in my character chart series, they need to be rather distinct from the other characters, and they usually need to be rather important. They need to have motives, ideals, character dialogues, choices, beliefs, and arcs. Which means that basically any side character is a bit difficult to discuss. And UnOrdinary has a boatload of those characters. From adults like the ones in Brannish and Louise, to the students, like the group that kidnapped Serafina or her low-tier posse, or those two guys that I keep on accidentally switching their names and you guys will never let me live it down. Anyways, the point is that there are many people, and I didn't and really couldn't mention or make a video for a lot of them. However, there is one character that has crept his way into the spotlight. One character that has remained in the background but still has been rather important to the story. Terrence is a rather important side character, and many of you would like me to address him. In fact, some of you, like the viewer Ghost Slayer, has addressed multiple issues in the comments. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? Terrence, excluding the prologue, is introduced right at the beginning of the second chapter, and is the fifth kind of important character, but he's the second side character introduced. And introduced by being bullied. You see, while we don't know a ton on Terrence, we have been given a handful of details by Eisen. Terrence, you mean the little guy? Well, he's a second year who can turn invisible. If I had to say, I'd say his level's around 2.4. He's pretty new to Wellston. Started attending around the beginning of this year. Terrence is rather new to Wellston, and as a lower mid-tier, he gets bullied, often by a handful of people, including Gavin. And during that bullying, we got to see good guy John save Terrence from being decked in the face. What's interesting is we get to see his response. Nothing. We see in the next chapter him scuttle off to the side, and later we see that fancy ability of his, Invisibility. Speaking of, let's discuss that, shall we? Invisibility is quite an interesting ability. It pops up often in other forms of pop culture or entertainment. And there are many people who would love to have invisibility as a power. The ability to blend in no matter where you are, to stay undetected, unnoticed, invisible. It's an impressive power. Anywhere else. You see, in the world of UnOrdinary, where people have abilities like laser beams, reflector shields, lightning, lock-on, time manipulation, strength, speed, defensive forms, and the ability to copy and improve any of those abilities, invisibility doesn't really seem that impressive. It has no combat uses, and it makes sense that Terrence would be an easier target. No ability to fight back, both actually physically fighting and a lack of a special ability that is helpful during a fight. His ability only lets him run and hide. Run, hide, and stalk. There's a reason why Eisen knew about Terrence. While being a shy, meek, introverted small child with no real reason to be seen by royals or high tiers, he has made a few splashes, thanks to that ability of his. Wellston Weekly is the newspaper of Wellston's weird press club, one of the only clubs that has been shown to us, other than Remy's weird peace club thing. The press club is rather an important part of the story. Cecile was once the head, now Eisen is the head, and it's the way people stay informed. When Serafina asks her little low-tier club if they read the paper, Evie responds with, "Oh yeah, we all do. It's the best way to keep up with what's going on around here, since most rumors are unreliable." Some of the articles are actually quite good and fun to read. And for us, it's the perfect way to forward the plot. Students who weren't part of a situation could find out what happened when they were away, or what new things are happening. Like the Joker situation, or the bombing at the mall. Terrence's ability of invisibility means that he can do what every reporter wishes they can do. Be in places that they're not meant to be in, hear things that they're not supposed to hear, and see things that they're not supposed to see. Which is exactly what occurs. Since he's invisible, we really don't know where he is or isn't. He could be anywhere. He could be in any one of these moments, and that occurs often. While Eisen is the first one to find out about John's past, it doesn't take Terrence too long to find out that something's going on, by stalking Arlo and noticing when he's injured and reporting it to Cecile. And it's not the first time that he's reported things that he probably shouldn't have seen. The top story, Students Cause Bomb Threat at Corriveau Mall, was a story of when Remy's gang, including Remy, Eisen, and Blake, when they had a little scuffle at the Corriveau Mall with the Ability Gauge Man. The problem isn't the fact that the story got out. The bigger problem is more who got the story out, and who got it out with so much detail. We hear from Remy that the article was incredibly accurate. That article, though, the details were scary accurate. I mean, aside from the fact that it incriminated us. We stopped at the booth, the bomb dropped. Then we ran towards the west entrance. Eisen got hit by a truck. Blake started to charge a beam. I ran ahead, even when security flagged us down. We find out later that Terrence is the author of that article. However, that's a big problem. Why does Terrence know? It's almost like he was there. It's almost like he was the Invisible Man that helped the Ability Gauge Man escape. The same man who has dangerous ties to a shadow organization that hunts high tiers down, strips them of their power, and kidnaps them. We even see this Invisible Man when John and Serafina go to the same Ability Gauge booth. And after Serafina gets tested and gets a high score, we see that Invisible Man follow them, or at least try to follow them home. Which brings us to the big question. Is Terrence the Invisible Man? Ask anyone in the UnOrdinary fanbase and the answer is yes. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of evidence against him. First, their MO, their modus operandi, their habit of how they work. Both Terrence and the Invisible Man are both quite skilled at following, stalking, and eavesdropping on high tiers. We see Terrence constantly follow high tiers like Arlo around, and the Invisible Man is known for following high tiers like Serafina back to their home. But that could be anyone. We're looking for something character specific. Well, there are two details that are very character specific, one more obvious than the other. First, ability. There are almost no characters with the exact same ability. There are characters that have similar abilities, like Blake and Krolik, both having a laser beam. While similar, they are quite different. However, two people with invisibility is too much of a coincidence, especially with this next detail. A weird little quirk about UnOrdinary is the text bubbles. Each character has their own color. The text bubbles are color-coded. It's a good way to know who's talking. Blake has a red, Remy has a pink, both Eisen and Arlo have a yellow. Now the colors aren't always the same, especially when the color was introduced at the beginning. The colors do tend to shift and change over time, but it does help identify each person. And wouldn't you know it, the one line that Mr. Invisible Man has matches the very, very few times Terrence has talked. They seem quite identical. And while Terrence's first text bubble doesn't match the exact hexadecimal code as the Invisible Man, the second time Terrence talks matches it perfectly. So with Terrence knowing the exact same thing that Mr. Invisible Man knows, the exact same MO, the exact same ability, and the same text bubble color, it's obvious that these two are the same person. It makes sense. It makes sense. It makes sense. Okay. There's one thing that's making me question this a little bit. Terrence himself. Terrence is a meek, shy, introverted student with no presence, both literally and figuratively. So how does someone like that join a group that at best just stalks high tiers to their home, drugs them, makes them lose their power, and tries to kidnap them, and at worst is a part of Ember, a group that has killed young vigilantes? How could a student like Terrence get involved with a group like that? Let's say, for now, that Terrence isn't the Invisible Man. What explains all that evidence that pins it on Terrence? Well, there is a way to explain all of it away. First, let's start with the MO. Stalking a high tier for any reason. They are similar, but Terrence wants a story. Meanwhile, the Invisible Man wants, stalk them, kidnap them, strip them of their powers, all that jazz. They are similar, but not the same. But more importantly, the two bits of evidence that are usually reserved for each individual character: ability and text color. However, there's an exception to that very rule: family. We don't see most families in UnOrdinary, but we do see one in particular: Seraphina's mom. And we're given her ability, time manipulation. And we also see her text bubble color. While it's not the exact same as Seraphina's, the hexadecimal code is basically the same. And to the naked eye, they're the same color. What am I saying? I'm saying that Terrence isn't the Invisible Man. I'm thinking that it's likely someone related to him, a father or an older brother, someone with the exact same ability and text bubble color, and with someone with a similar MO. However, there is one problem: Terrence's top story. How could Terrence write about what happened if he wasn't the Invisible Man? How could Terrence write about something that he wasn't there to witness? There is something that's a bit odd when I started looking into Terrence, and it's what Eisen said about him. I didn't finish his quotes. When Arlo asks about Terrence's work, Eisen responds with, "He hasn't submitted anything particularly riveting. Not since I became press leader anyways." Pretty mediocre writing, I'd say. I'm not into press or news stories or such, but there is something that I think everyone knows. It's not the story, it's how you write it. Even if you were given the best story ever, if your writing was mediocre, then you wouldn't have gotten top story. And that's maybe because Terrence didn't write the story. Remy's comment on how accurate the article was caught my eye. Now, in UnOrdinary, sometimes there are little sentences off to the side, not in a text bubble. They're usually unimportant, so I ignore them, but Remy's was interesting. The details were scary accurate. I mean, aside from the fact that it incriminated us. Aside from the fact that it incriminated them. That's interesting, because the newspapers started to shift blame onto the people trying to be heroes. Kind of like there was an inside man, kind of like Ember had someone to write stories blaming vigilantes that stood against them. Shifting the focus on, oh no, some shadow organization is killing kids, to look at the kids that are trying to play hero, what fools. By using the press, they shift attention and blame from themselves onto the people trying to stop them. And the article does the same thing. It incriminates Remy, Eisen, and Blake for trying to stop someone who's putting trackers into teddy bears. I think Terrence's father or older brother was the Invisible Man, and he wrote the article and gave it to Terrence. It's possible that this person was already in the news industry and gave Terrence the idea of joining the press team, to follow in the footsteps of someone he idolizes. And that person knew that Terrence was on the press team and gave him a story that would guarantee him a spot on the front page. A story that blames the kids who tried to stop someone from doing something illegal. A story that knew exactly what was going on even if Terrence wasn't there. You see, I think we look too much at the evidence that makes these two the same person that we stop looking at the characters themselves. Terrence isn't known for anything. He's a meek student. How would a shy, introverted, meek student like this join a dangerous group that hurts others? That doesn't sound like Terrence at all. But hey, what about you? Do you still think Terrence is the Invisible Man? Have I changed your minds? What should I talk about next? Leave it in the comments. But, like always, thank you for watching.